1. I used to work as a housing inspector for a government body. One day I received a complaint from Mr. X. Mr. X stated that his housing provider, a giant housing corporation that employed thousands of people, was ignoring the tickets he was lodging with their maintenance department. I conducted an inspection of his property. Mr. X stated that the maintenance team had inspected and deduced that the damp was condensation arising from his poor upkeep of their property. All of the rooms appeared clean and tidy. In the corner of one of the rooms, I found clear evidence of damp penetrating in through the wall and across the flooring. On the exterior, I found damage to the masonry that was clearly allowing rainwater to enter the structure. As per our standard procedure, I sent an email to the company outlining the issues identified and gave them 28 days to resolve the matter. This type of housing companies sign up to the best practice standards for all their properties and are meant to operate far above the legal minimum for rentals. After a few days, I received an email from the head of their maintenance department stating that the issue would be investigated, but also, in so many words, asking if I was confident in my findings. I scrolled down to find a long email chain that had gone from pillar to post around their maintenance team. Everyone that had ever visited the property, stating that there was no damp and implying that I didn't know what I was talking about. One after another, all disputing my competence. Some managers will forward email chains like this as a non-confrontational way of saying what they're thinking. As someone that could take legal action due to the state of this property, I found this lack of respect indicative of their attitude towards their housing standards, and wanted to take some action, but I'd already granted them a time period that needed to expire before I would take action in relation to this case. I forgot entirely about this incident and carried on with my busy workload. That was until several weeks later, when one of my colleagues called across the office to me, asking if I could take a phone call in relation to a housing disrepair. I said that I was snowed under with cases and asked her what it involved. She said it was another tenant from the same housing company, complaining about the standard of their repair work. She said that another officer could deal with it if I didn't have the capacity. It was like she handed 8-year-old me my main Christmas present. I told her, "I guess I'm not so busy after all, send it over." My colleague transferred the call over. It was a very distressed man stating over and over, "They've put guttering in my living room and the water is still coming in." I asked if he meant on the outside of the building from his living room. He said, "No," and then repeated the statement over and over. I said, "Are you available right now for me to come take a look?" I moved around my other appointments and was there within 30 minutes. I entered a spotless top-floor apartment, only to find the following: a hole in the ceiling with water pouring through, a bucket, guttering across the roof of his flat, emptying into the bucket. It seemed that the roof had a leak which caused the ceiling to collapse in. Instead of repairing the leak and the damaged ceiling, the company's maintenance team had run guttering along the length of the leak, and a drain pipe which emptied into a bucket. It rains constantly where I was working. The man had been in a state of limbo for several days, having to empty the bucket every few hours, as not to let the apartment flood. He was severely sleep-deprived, and stated that he was afraid to venture away from the bucket for too long. The repair had been conducted several days prior, and he was on his last legs. His girlfriend had also accused him of lying over the phone, with her stating that he couldn't be at home, as she could hear heavy rain in the background. In that moment, many questions went through my mind. I wondered why the company thought it was okay to not repair the defective roofing. I wondered why the roof hadn't at least been patched prior to a full repair. I wondered why the repairman hadn't run the downpipe out the window to avoid the need for a bucket. I wondered why the tenant had not been temporarily rehoused with his roof collapsing. I wondered how this maintenance team would ever have the stones to question anyone's judgment. I was a mixture of utterly perplexed, astonished, and delighted, all at the same time. I decided to write an email as professionally as I possibly could, with no reference to terrible repair works. I can see that your maintenance team have already conducted repairs to try and remediate the damp. It doesn't appear that these works have been sufficient in resolving the issue. Please find enclosed a notice requiring works to be undertaken. However, I sent the email complete with pictures of the room, with the new water feature as the centerpiece, and a legal notice attached referring specifically to issues arising from interior rainwater goods. I'm aware that legal notices are viewed by higher-ups in company and permanently stay on the property file. I could just imagine the maintenance team, their higher-ups, and their legal department all sat around appreciating the repair works. This was deeply satisfying by itself, but even more so when they completed the repairs to both properties within weeks. 2. Let's go back a few years. I was a combat engineer platoon sergeant. We had recently gotten a new company commander who thought his shit didn't stink. My first interaction with him was when I got back from running an M240B range, where I was told he wanted to speak to all leadership immediately in the conference room. Well, it took 3 hours for him to arrive, and despite one SG calling many times, he insisted we stay. The entire meeting was him bragging about himself and saying that he was trying to get the company slotted for a deployment to the Middle East, as well as how excited he was to go. I spoke up and basically said he's a dumbass, but with more words, which ended the meeting, which got me a stern talking to and thinly veiled threats. The captain had been in for 15 years and never once deployed. That takes effort and a lot of figurative dick-sucking. He only wanted to go now because he was up for major. It turned out Brigade had a mission and asked for volunteers. Captain Dipshit volunteered me to go despite knowing I had gotten married a week earlier. I made it very clear I did not want to go to the higher-ups. I was told it was between myself and the captain. Well, a month out, my sister-in-law committed suicide, immediately after she miscarried at 33 weeks. Found them both in the basement of their house. Well, Captain Dipshit didn't care. No leave, and I was still to leave about a week after the funeral. Fuck him. I walked in to talk to the command sergeant major, and was immediately dropped from the deployment, but the captain was so far up the battalion commander's ass that nothing happened to him. About 8 months later, Captain Dipshit got his wish. Headquarters platoon and one other was slotted to deploy. Of course, because I had the most combat experience and most deployments in the platoon, he naturally decided that's why my platoon should go. Now, in order to deploy, you first have to go on a month-long field exercise where you are graded on performance. This generally applies to the higher levels of leadership. By this time I was just pissed, so I got my squad leaders together and improvised a few missions. First, everyone was to follow the CPT's instructions as literally as possible, no matter how dumb, and not give any advice. This led us to get absolutely destroyed in training, which was glorious. Secondly, and most importantly, was the psychological aspect. So this dipshit commander would go to bed nightly at 2100 no matter what. In the deserts of California, you can find all sorts of creepy crawlies to slip in a sleeping bag while sprinkling juice on his uniform. They'd also periodically hide some of his gear or render his rifle inoperable. So for days this went on. Poor guy slept very little, because I ensured his tent was set over top of a beehive. These bees hated any vibration and loved juice. The dumbass never realized why he was constantly getting stung. As we were to be falling under a new brigade, I had to go meet the higher-ups, and wouldn't you know it, the colonel we were set to fall under turned out to have been my first company commander, who I got along great with. I pulled him aside and called up my squad leaders, where he basically told him Captain Dipshit was going to get someone killed, pointed out his erratic behavior and the overall poor performance. Needless to say, he was quickly relieved of command, career killer, and sent back to work in an office where he belonged. As for myself and my platoon, I still didn't want to go, but the new company commander was my old platoon leader from my second deployment, plus I couldn't let my guys go without me. Turned out it would be my last deployment, as some injuries force you out of the military, but everyone came back alive. I sent a text to one of the old squad leaders, because for the life of me I couldn't remember exactly what the deal was with the captain. He had been an E4 prior to becoming an officer. Clearly, I did not care enough to retain that information. 3. Backstory. I dropped out of college after a couple semesters and joined the Navy for 5 years, then returned to college after my enlistment. During my second attempt at college, I took a usability class, where we focused on making websites and documents more intuitive. In the class, we had a semester-long group project where we were to find a website, draft a long document going over all the issues the site had, and provide solutions with usability testing performed and recorded in a lab, culminating in a presentation to the class with our group. I was part of a 5-person group. I was thinking, great, that means more people to break up what's needed. Boy, was I wrong. My group consisted of 1 other guy and 3 girls. Our weakest link turned out to be one of the girls. I'm pretty sure her elevator didn't hit the top floor, and she even admitted this was the only class she was taking to raise enough of a GPA to graduate. At this time, I was doing IT and website work for family and friends as a side hustle. One of these websites was kind of rough and hard to navigate for being a health food to-go business. I brought this website and customer to the group and pitched that we would have a real website and company that could utilize the changes we suggest. Another teammate presented a website for a hipster restaurant in Austin, whose website had 2 topless chicks in a bathtub as one of the sideshow photos. I'm no prude, but this being a college in West Texas, I just thought it probably wasn't the best choice. Maybe I'm an asshole, but I persuaded the group to use my website. Fast forward halfway through the semester, and the group member who suggested the other website wants to go to the professor and kick out the dumb girl. Mean girl tries to tell me, a veteran, that in the real world we wouldn't have to deal with this incompetence or some shit like that. I literally laughed at her and said, I've been in the real world and you will always have some idiot you have to drag along on a team to get shit done. She didn't like this, so the other 3 members went to the professor. She called us in one at a time, and when she got to me, she asked if I wanted to make the dumb girl do her own project since she wasn't pulling her weight. I said no, since that's shitty to make someone start over halfway through. So I got to keep the work we started and just give the dumb girl simple tasks. The project continues, we get recorded usability tests done, and create our presentation. I'm able to get the owners of the business whose website we use to come to our presentation. It went great, and the owners asked me to make the changes ASAP. My old group's presentation was garbage, as they went to the hipster restaurant websites. After all the drama, the professor told me I had the best presentation, and she was happy we had actual customers to present to. When she asked how much work the dumb girl did, I flat lied, and said she actually helped a bunch. The dumb girl later told me she just barely had a high enough grade to graduate. 4. My neighbors have always been pretty epic, whether it's epically bad, weird, or wonderful. The late noughties were no exception. My husband and I were 24, 25 and attending LSU. The chick living above us, we were first floor, she was second, at the time was of the petite, bouncy, monosyllabic variety. She was pretty quiet at first. Then I guess she came out of her shell, because a month after she moved in, I was walking my dogs on my birthday, and guests of hers went streaking through the quad. We didn't have a quad, but that's what they yelled as they ran by me. I figured. At least I saw a birthday suit on my birthday. She apparently had tasted the party life and liked it. Next thing I know, she's a 2 a.m. feng shui enthusiast letting her guests smash glass bottles by dropping them from her balcony, by the one and only door my dogs had to go out for me to clean up. Her dog was a hound dog with the loudest bark I've ever heard in my life. That shit could make your butt pucker if you weren't expecting it. But as soon as she had frequent company, she actually stopped walking her own dog. She'd come down to the bottom step of the stairs and let it go. It inevitably would go where it smelt other dogs, my front fucking door. I asked her to not let it pee in our doorway 4 or 5 times. Even peed on a package we'd had delivered. Now, I had 2 dogs, so the constant barking didn't bother me much. The piss in broken glass was infuriating, though. My apartment office was useless, and there was no camera to record who was doing it. We faced the river, and they were too cheap to spring for a camera for just 6 units. I eventually decided she must be stopped. Knowing her dog generally barks in 30-minute to 1 hour long stretches, I'd wait until I knew she'd gone to sleep, then get out my big fucking stick, stand on the bed, and jab the ceiling in short, rapid knocks. Baskerville would awaken, the yapping start, and the familiar thud, thud, thud of footsteps would send me peacefully off to sleep. After we had to pay a vet bill we had for one of my dogs when she left her oozy trash bag by the bottom of the steps and never actually took it to the trash, I glued change to the bottom step for her to trip over trying to pick up the next time she was drunk. Okay, my husband glued, I just dropped them because I wasn't trying to kill anybody. That little dandy worked for months. It was like she only saw the quarters when she was drunk. Eventually, the chick upstairs upped her ante and began to leave her garbage right outside of her door for days at a time, on a floor made of wooden slats with about half an inch between them. And that half inch was just wide enough for the oozing rancid filth that marinated by her door all day in the Louisiana swamp-ass heat, to drip down and leave aeronautical glue by my door. It even dripped onto my shirt when I went out one day and I had to toss the shirt. There was no salvaging it. So after this current garbage sat there for 5 entire days, her personal best, it was there so long she added another bag to it. I'd had enough. I walked outside and looked up to see how the bags were positioned, then went inside for my trusty stepladder and ancient samurai sword that was still sharp as all fucknuts from World War II. The OG bag of putrescence was laying 100% on its side, so the stankosity was free to drip down to my floor for maximum enjoyment. But its ass end was up in the air just waiting to be penetrated. So I unsheathed my sword, I've always wanted to say that, and carefully stabbed the raised end with neat little slices. A poor guy just coming back from campus came through the apartment gate while I was mid-stab and stared at my short, chubby little self in my bathrobe, boy shorts, Doc Martens, because they make me taller, and tank top perched on a stepladder with the sword raised above my head. He broke off eye contact as soon as his brain processed what he was seeing. Pretty sure at that moment he thought I was insane. That's fair. Luckily, we lived right off campus, so any huckety-fuckety that went on was flat out ignored. After I finished, I took my stuff back inside, then I pulled my chair up to the front door and picked up one of the classics, It, and waited. An hour and a half later, I heard her door open. There was a few moments of silence, then an ungodly screech, followed by glorious, glorious hollering.
Wait, no, it's looking everywhere, stop it. Damn it, my new shoes, no, stop, no, wait. You can't put it down, get it downstairs. Get it downstairs, just get it out of here. My goddamn clothes are ruined.
Feet simultaneously hammered down the stairs and across my ceiling toward the bedroom as whoever she was with ran a leaking garbage bag to the trash, and she went back in to get it cleaned up. The shower turned on moments later. I had a giant sticky glob of nasty right outside my door, but it was a price I was willing to pay and clean up, as long as she didn't leave her garbage outside again. 5. This happened back in 2013, but I just remembered it while talking to my mom the other day. For some context, this happened while my family was still living in Germany. My dad had just lost his job, which promoted us to look for less expensive housing options, and we moved from our relatively nice older apartment building to one of the prefabricated concrete ones in a different district. I was 9, so I didn't care too much about the aesthetics of the building, and I was thrilled about the fact that we now had direct access to a courtyard and cement pathways that I could ride my bike on. While my parents were still unpacking, some of the kids from down the hall came to our door and asked if I wanted to ride bikes with them. which became our weekend routine for a while. It only stopped when an old lady from the same side of the hall made a complaint about us being in the courtyard. Not that we were being loud or vulgar, just that we were present. Mind you, all of the apartments in our side of the hall faced the road, which was completely opposite to the courtyard we used, so she couldn't even see us when we were outside. She sold it to my parents as
looking out for other tenants,
and claimed that people had complained to her specifically about how they were worried about walking in the courtyard while there were a couple of kids on bikes in the general area. My parents pretty much ignored her and just told me to play with my friends on one of the nearby streets. No idea why they thought this was a safe alternative. But none of us wanted to do that since we couldn't practice bike tricks on the road. About a week after I ignored her complaint, I stayed out past time I was meant to be home, and left my bike around the side of the building so I could get it in the morning. However, as you might have guessed at this point, I woke up the next day to find my bike missing. I, being a dramatic little kid, ran up the stairs to our hall, sobbing, and told my parents what had happened. Apparently, the old lady told my parents that she had taken the bike from outside because we were still in the courtyard, and they were mad at me for not going to the street like they asked. Then they told me to go down the hall and politely ask for the bike back, which I did. Unfortunately, the old lady told me that I needed to be taught a lesson, and if I gave her a written apology, yes, actually, I could have it back at the end of the week. It was Sunday morning. I was, of course, pissed, and started to plot my, at the time, brilliant revenge. The morning of the next Saturday rolled around, and I was ready to put my plan in motion. I had put on a pretty good show of being remorseful to my mom, who lent me some money to buy a tin of biscuits to apologize with. I had my written apology, the biscuits, and several woblas in a sandwich bag I had hidden in my coat. For those who have never heard of wobla, it is a salted dried fish popular in Russia, and that I personally think is one of the worst smells maybe ever. My mom is Russian and loves them, which is why we had so many in the apartment. I knocked on the old lady's door, and she invited me to put the things down. She accepted my letter and the biscuits, and I asked her if I could use her bathroom before I left with my bike, which she allowed. While she was sitting in the living room, I was hustling quietly around her bathroom and bedroom, hiding one of those gross dried fish anywhere I thought she wouldn't look regularly. Stuck between pipes under the sink, stuffed under her giant wardrobe, and even thrown onto the top shelf of her closet. With the all-natural stink bombs deployed, I washed my hands and all but sprinted out of her apartment with my bike, thrilled with the stunt I managed to pull off. From what I overheard from discussions between the parents of my friends and I, the old lady complained to the landlord about the awful fish smell on several occasions. He was a total jerk who rarely did anything about tenant complaints. Before she finally hired a company to come deep clean her apartment, she found and complained about the very old, very nasty fish, and actually moved out a couple months later, although I am not sure that was due to the lasting effects of the fish incident, or something else entirely. Of course, I feel bad about it now, but at the time I felt like the biggest, coolest genius known to man. I guess the moral of the story is not to confiscate bikes from vindictive kids. And don't ever try Vola. Seriously. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 120. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then please do like, subscribe, and comment, and share the video around with all your friends and family. And anyone else you think might enjoy it. Alright, now, I think we have a little birthday shout-out to do today. Today's birthday shout-out, this is the 24th, isn't it? Yes, it is. Okay, today's birthday shout-out goes to Larika. I'm fairly sure that's the right pronunciation. Ryan wrote it for me phonetically, and this comes from Ryan, your roommate. I'm sure Ryan hopes you have just as wonderful a birthday as I do, and if no one else is pampering you, take time to do it yourself. Okay, now before we go, first time doing this on camera, I think. Well, no, I've done it on stream, but first time recording and putting it in a video, so here we go. I'm going to sing happy birthday to you. This could be weird for both of us, but let's see. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Larika. Happy birthday to you. All right. Unless, of course, your name's meant to be pronounced Larissa. But who knows? Anyway, with that, I'm going to head off for now. So thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.